For me, my struggle started with my weight. For years, I was going around the mountain, and I call it going around the mountain because what it looks like for me is 3 months out of the year, that would be the first 3 months. I would do detox cleanse by like March, the end of March, I would have lost 50 pounds. And I was just like, yay, I was excited. And I went on, like, I called it a party. And I partied all the way until December, and then
Oh gosh.
realized that I had gained back the weight and then some.
Wow.
And I was just starting to become frustrated with, this consistent, going around the mountain. I knew what to do to lose some weight, but I didn't know what the process or the inner work that needed to happen to shift myself to maintain and consistently continue on that journey.
Welcome to the CoachMD podcast. I'm Dr. Charles Glassman, bringing you 3 decades of experience as a physician and a coach. Join us as we navigate the maze of medical advice with real-life stories, empowering you to take charge of your health. In our That Happens segment, guests share transformative experiences, reminding us that we're all human and not just patients. So get ready for a journey into healthcare reimagined, where empowerment and discovery pave the way. Hey, it's Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD. In my over 30 years of medical practice, I made it my goal to help people create strong minds, healthy bodies, and unshakable spirits. And that's why I launched a CoachMD podcast, because I want to talk to people who navigate not only the healthcare system, but life in general, because the way we navigate our life really, it supersedes what a doctor can teach us, because the lessons and the experiences that we have in life, most doctors, with all due respect to my colleagues, when you come into a doctor's office, they don't have time to think about giving you advice, real true advice. All we have time for, sadly, is what's your problem? What can I do for you? And that usually translates, what pill can I prescribe? And most of our medical issues, most of the visits to doctors' offices, they originate from 2 main categories. And those are behavioral health, mental health, emotional challenges, and lifestyle choices. And so the guests that I have on my show are actually people, most of them are not doctors, but they're people who have been able to help others, help themselves first. That's the number one. They've been able to help themselves first, and then they've been able to share their experiences with true, authentic healing. Because doctors, again, I don't want to fault my colleagues. It's very hard. It's a struggle, really, and especially in this day and age when you have big groups now with hospital groups and where doctors are sometimes have quotas now, how many patients they have to see. There's no way that they can take the time. So that's why many people, and I recommend this, do the research on your own. Search out if there's something bothering you. Yeah, it can scare the heck out of you. Get people like my guest today, who I'm going to introduce you to, who can kind of help you navigate and help you with different skills that can elevate your wellness, elevate your health, and allow you to live truly satisfying and fulfilling lives. And healthy, obviously, that's true wellness, mind, body, spirit. So, Sopheia, thank you so much for coming on the CoachMD podcast. I know a mutual friend of ours, 𝐓𝐇𝐿𝐒, introduced us, and I'm so glad and appreciative for the introduction. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Charles, for having me. I'm very excited to be here today, and love the subject matter that you're talking about.
Yeah, I know it's right up your alley because, like all of us, and with me, when I started, I changed my practice. I had to get out of the rat race, so I changed my practice in 2002 to what's called a concierge practice, and that at the time that was unknown. Mostly in the United States, there were probably a dozen type practices like that. I was in like the first 12 or so practices in the country doing that, in the first in New York State, and I had to get out of the rat race, but it allowed me to take the time to backtrack and to really get to know my patients. And so I started writing as kind of motivation for them. But I realized as I was writing and giving advice, you can't give advice unless you're walking the walk, right? So I had to walk the walk. I had to look into myself. What would get me derailed in my wellness, or get me anxious or depressed or sad or whatever? And I'd have to look at that in myself so I could help others. So I know that you did that, Sophia, and if you could just kind of tell us how that evolved for you, and how kind of, I talk about mind, body, spirit, and the spiritual part is so ignored, which is such a vital, so ignored by so many healthcare practitioners, such a vital part of our lives. So if you could kind of guide us and let us know how you went inside and discovered what was going on wrong with you.
All right. Well, I mean, for me, my struggle started with my weight. And so for years, I was going around the mountain, and I call it going around the mountain because what it looks like for me is 3 months out of the year, that would be the first 3 months, I would do detox, cleanse,
Mm.
all kind of work and everything. And then I would, by like March, the end of March, I would have lost 50 pounds. And I was just like, yay, I was excited. And I went on, like I called it a party. And I partied all the way until December, and then
Oh God.
realized that I had gained
Mm.
back the weight and then some.
Wow.
And I was just starting to become frustrated with, this consistent, going around the mountain. I knew what to do to lose some weight, but I didn't know what the process or the inner work that needed to happen
Mm.
to shift myself to maintain and consistently continue on that journey. So
Yeah.
I would continue repeated to do the thing and walk around the same spot around the mountain. And I had this visual one time of just making a hole around this mountain,
Mm.
thinking I'm making progress and really only going in the same place, in the same position. And I needed to figure out how to get up and over the mountain so I could get to the other side. And so that was when I read a quote. And I had read this quote a lot before,
Mm.
but this particular time it spoke to my spirit, if you would say,
Yeah.
or my soul. And it says, "Beloved, I wish above all things that thou would prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prosper." And I was like, oh
Mm.
my goodness, what's my soul? What's my soul's prosperity? And how
Wow.
can this help me to lose weight and keep it off? Because that was my goal. That was my focus area. And I went on a journey of this self-discovery to find out what my soul's prosperity was. And I found it wrapped in self-mastery.
Mm.
And I started from there. And on that journey, when I think I call it waking up, when I woke up or when I looked up, I had released 100 pounds. And so after that, I said, oh my goodness, I found a secret. I must tell everyone.
Yeah.
And that's when I started my coaching practice.
Wow. That's great. Now, when you talk about self-mastery, and one of my favorite uh, thought, kind of, I like it. I've been like this. I'm very practical, right? So I like to encapsulate things, and so for me, I encapsulated the two most vital characteristics for life success is self-honesty and self-discipline, right?
Yes.
And so I know that everyone has that looks a little different for everybody, but that's definitely, if you can master those things, that's self-mastery. And I want, if you could share with my audience how that looked for you as you were, because obviously you didn't go from 0 to 100, or
Right.
0 pounds lost to 100 pounds lost like overnight. Obviously
Right.
that was a challenge, that was a journey, those were steps that you took every day. And so because we often, if you said to somebody, or I said to somebody, or they said to us, Sophia, I want to lose 100 pounds, right? But then they go, oh my God, that's so daunting, 100 pounds.
Mhm.
And they get paralyzed by that, right? So how did that look for you, the steps? So you had this quote, this epiphany, this spiritual awakening or reawakening. And what happened next?
Well, it was a lot of introspection. It was a lot of introspection, discovering who I was as a person, what had led to this particular place that I was at, and
Hmm.
why is it I consistently was going around the mountain. Consistency is one of the key ingredients in being able to release 100 pounds. It's all the small steps that you need to take every single day that kind of gradually adds up to getting you to the place where you want to go. It's the closing of the gap, and it's really a journey more than it is, just getting to the destination.
Right, right. Yeah. So, did you, was it, were you eating out of, boredom? Were you eating out of, uh, so for instance, I mean, it's heavy stuff and you share as much as you want. I'm not going to, but like I had a patient once who unfortunately was sexually assaulted when she was a teenager, and she was very thin when that happened. And basically, I talk about fight or flight. To flee the danger of ever being assaulted again, she fed herself so she would no longer be attractive, no longer be thin. So she became super morbidly obese, uh, as her fight or flight in a way.
Mhm.
So, that's an extreme, a lot of people. But when we use food as a drug or as a self-medication, I guess when we introspect, um, it's finding, what are we medicating? What are we whatever, and then what are the steps that we're going to take? So if you could kind of give me a snippet of what you might help out, what you kind of saw in yourself, and how you might help somebody who's really struggling in a similar spot.
All right. Well, one day I sat down and um I think I was upset or something. And I sat down and I was just like, one of my go-to foods was a brownie pie.
Mm,
And I heard a voice say to me, um, do you know why you like sweets? And I was
mm,
like, no. And then I thought about it. And I heard the voice say, you like sweets because you want people to be sweet to you. And that
okay.
was
Wow.
when I was discovering that I was an emotional eater. I
Mm,
would, if I got upset, in order to help maintain my calm, I would be like, let me just step away and get something to eat or crunch my way to calm, or, eat a brownie pie. And afterwards, I'd feel better. I could address the issue more. So I was an emotional eater.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So especially with sugar, because, physiologically, uh, we're programmed to respond to sugar, and sugar is supposed to be a quick energy burst.
Hmm.
It jacks up our insulin, and it gives us, super, to jacks up our insulin to get into our muscles so we can fight and flee more efficiently. And so that insulin spike gives us kind of a euphoria, gives us a feeling of, kind of you want people to be sweet to you. It's kind of an artificial drug. It's a drug, okay,
Hmm.
to kind of comfort us. So
Yes.
it's um, so it's important to know why we eat in excess of what we need to survive, because
Right.
most of us don't need, that much. Now, I like, I love food, sweets and fats, you name it. Any food, right? I love, and so I would have this thing with patients of mine who would come into to my office, and they'll say, "Oh, Dr. Glassman, you don't know. You've never been overweight. You can't really appreciate what I'm going through." And I'd look at them, I say, "Well, if we made a bet today, and you bet me that I couldn't gain 20 pounds in a month, you'd lose that bet, because I could easily gain 20 pounds in a month if I ate everything I wanted to eat and not care about my body, my health, just that instant gratification. Again, it's an instant gratification. It's that high. But then you have to keep feeding it like any other drug. So we all have that. And you talked about it with consistency. So when you identified that you were an emotional eater, what did you do to stop it? Because it's like you wanted the sweetness from others, but that just doesn't come. Like, you can't just say, okay, I'm going to get that sweetness from others. Okay, I'm just going to stop eating sugar and I'm going to replace it with true connection. It's a nice idea, right? But it just doesn't happen. So, like, what kind of the next steps, like, to,
Well, the
yeah.
next stop was, which I felt like was my superpower. And I feel like it's all our superpower,
Yeah.
is love. And so I had to go to that place of awareness and acceptance, because that's how we become who we are.
Yeah.
And get to that place where I'm practicing self-love. Because I was a person who practiced self-care. And sometimes we confuse self-care with self-love. We think they're they're the same thing, but they're not. You
Yeah.
know, I did a lot of self-care activities. I would eat healthy, I would exercise, I would take a bath, go shopping, get myself a treat, do a spa, and those kind of things. And all of those things are self-care things, but that's not self-love.
Right.
And I had to learn that self-love came with self-compassion, understanding, and empathy, realizing that I wasn't the only one struggling with this, and that there are many people out there on the same journey trying to get to where I had gotten to. And so that was part of the compassion that I had, to now having the desire to want to help people. And so I had to go through my own way of loving myself, being consistent with that, talking sweetly to myself. One of the things that I did when I kept doing this round the mountain thing, I would punish myself. I would punish myself after I eat that brownie pie. And I would be like, now you were bad. You ate brownie pie. So now you have to do really hard exercise. And for the next 2 weeks, you can only have an apple and chicken broth. And that would be, I would punish myself. And I had to step away from all of that, punishing myself, recognizing that it was going to take moment by moment. So if I had enough willpower to last for a week, or even, then I messed up, that I had to go back to the drawing board, forgive myself, and then step into that place of, okay, I'm picking it up. And I had to do it as far as going back to the meal. So if I mess up on this meal, then my next meal would be one that would be more healthy, and it would be things that I'm, saying that I need to eat for my health and for my wellness.
Yeah. So you're giving yourself grace,
Yes.
and if we could all give, ourselves grace and others grace, just think how a lot easier. So or you could say you're giving yourself a break, but it's grace is really what it is. It is a spiritual journey, and a lot of that, when you say you hear that voice within, I talk of the in a lot of the things that I believe and that I write about, the distinction between our primitive animalistic nature, which I call driven by the automatic brain, and our divine nature. And our divine nature, my true belief is that allows us to speak and to hear from God. And
Yes.
and that's, that, look, I know not everybody believes that. I'm saying this is what I believe, and I have many reasons, which, I've talked about, and I will continue to talk about, for doing that, very practical reasons, really, if you look at it, and some impractical, because it's a supernatural. We're in the natural world, and if you believe in God and a higher power, which I believe is God, that's supernatural. So when you hear that voice, when you give yourself that grace, and you back up and you really hear that inner voice, which many believe is the Holy Spirit, um, it does guide you, and it
Yes,
can guide you, and you realize that when you're eating more than you need to survive, there's a reason for it, and
right.
it's usually the reason is usually what I say driven from the automatic brain or our primitive animalistic nature, and it's usually has to do with that fight or flight mechanism, and so it's important to discover in order to kind of clear out the cobwebs and the static so you can
Mhm.
allow that inner voice so you can hear the voice of God or your Holy Spirit, um, your higher consciousness, so you're able to hear that and that can help guide you. So yeah, that was really interesting how you listen to that
Yes.
voice. Yeah.
I mean, and I think the boys had been speaking to me the whole time, that I've always had this guide. And there were certain times that I respond to it and certain times that I didn't. And I think the atmosphere that was created when I started on the journey was one that opened more of the door, because I was seeking my soul's prosperity and what that meant for me, and how that was going to help me live my life. And so that was more room for the Holy Spirit to speak to me. And so I learned a lot of different things. One of the things that I came across and I learned was that 95% of our lives are lived in the subconscious mind,
Mm.
and that only 5% are lived in the consciously. And so in that subconscious mind, there's a lot of things, and you talk about that primitive mind going on. And so my question was, how do we get the 95% of us to
Mm.
be in support of that 5% of what we want? When we think about it spiritually, it's our heart belief is at 95%. And so we have these beliefs within us that guides our lives subconsciously. We're not even aware of it. We're doing things because somebody else said something. And I think this is where self-mastery comes in, because self-mastery is self-leadership. It's where we influence our own thinking, feelings, and actions. And so a lot of time when we start peeling back the layers and looking within, we see that we hear voices, whether that's from our mother or from teachers or from wherever it came from.
Yeah.
Those voices speak louder than our own voice, and they're directing how we live our life. And so after the process of self-discovery, there has to be a process of self-creation. You have to be able to rewrite your own personal story to what you want it to be, and
Mm.
to be able to release some of these beliefs that you've had planted within you and plant new seeds, so that way you can, reap a different harvest.
Yeah, right. And I know that there are and you've spoken about this. I've heard you talk about this, is that there are certain things that we do that are the biggest saboteurs of our success, and one of those is excuses. And if
Yes.
you could talk a little bit about how you see that as being the biggest saboteur to progress, to taking instead of taking two steps forward and one step back, you end up taking one step forward and two or three steps back.
Right.
So if you could talk a little bit about that and like what you can, some practical things you can do to stop that or to not listen to those voices.
All right. Well, one of the things is in the excuse process, I, made a decision. I said, well, you know, maybe, I was trying to be able to accept myself the way I was, being overweight and everything. I was just, okay, I'm going through the process, and I start making this excuse. Well, because I had heard that before. God made some people to be fat and some people to be skinny. And I guess I was just one of the fat people that he had created. And so therefore I just need to accept it and figure
Right.
out how to live with that. And so when you have those type of conversation and you say, well, God made some people to be fat and some people to be skinny, and I guess he just made me to be fat, then it's hard to change that particular belief, because now you're connecting it to God, who is like all seeing, all knowing, all loving, and everything like that. And if this is how he created me, then this is what I have to accept about me. So that made it difficult to transition from where I was to where I wanted to be. And I had to like undo that particular thing. It never sat well within me to say that's who I was. I always drew when people took pictures of me and they would show me the picture, I would be very upset. Once upon a time, I was like, do not take pictures of me. I was like, I don't want to see it, because that is not who I am. I am this other girl, and I know who I am. And I would draw pictures of this other girl that I saw in my mind. And so when people would try to, say, well, this is the reality of your image, I would be like devastated. I'd be so upset. I
Wow.
was just like, no.
Yeah. Wow. That's really heavy. I can feel that. And I understand. I'm compassionate to those who have these weight struggles. Okay. And the fact that there are some genetics involved. Yes. Okay. And if genetics are involved, that's how you were born. Okay. That's God-given. That's the print. That's your blueprint, right? However, when there's a whole movement now about accepting people for who they are, okay? And I'm going to specifically talk about obese people or super morbidly obese, like Lizzo made this, don't fat shame me. So it's now a big thing that if somebody is unhealthy, on a healthy weight, if you try to help that person or show them or try to educate them that maybe this is not the right weight for you, then you're somehow fat shaming them. But in reality, if you want to talk about God and if you want to use that as a manipulation for thoughts that say, don't fat shame me, I'm going to point something out, because when we eat in excess of what we need to survive, okay, and that means excess of calories that we need to survive, that excess is coming not from that divine nature, but it's coming from that primitive, automatic animal nature. And so what that means is if we're eating more than we need to survive, we're eating it for pleasure. Okay. And what is pleasure but the escape from pain? Okay. We had a thing when I was in karate, when I was doing karate in my 20s and early 30s. There was a saying that the greatest uh the greatest pleasure in life is the relief of pain. Okay. So that's kind of like a heavy mindset, but because in karate, when you're really forcing doing exercise, it's painful, and when you end it, that's the greatest pleasure, rather than whatever. But that's just a little side. But when we eat in excess, so if somebody says, "Oh, I'm just the way I am, so I'm going to keep just eating the way I eat," well, when you eat the way you eat in excess of what you need to survive, then you are feeding, like you said, that pleasure roller coaster. So you get that pleasure from eating sugars, that instant gratification, or fat. So we need sugar to fight and flee our people, things in our brain that threaten us. And that's a quick release. And fat, when we eat fat, that's to prepare for when there's famine, when we need to store it up. So those are things that is our base instinct. Animals don't think about it. They just do that instinct. So yes, you might have a hippopotamus or an elephant, that are vegetarians, and there you see that's genetically they're very big. And so you may get humans who are born bigger than others, but bigger doesn't mean percent body fat. The the human being does not need, and especially in this day and age, we don't need to store body fat. We don't need to be 30, 40, 50% body fat. So when you are eating in excess, that is not what God made you to be. I'm sorry. God didn't make you to be that. God made you to be the way you're supposed to be, to function in life and eat what you need to survive. And that doesn't mean that you can't eat other things, sometimes that you need, because whatever you could, there's, I've done other podcasts on this. It doesn't mean, look, I had a piece of cake last night, all right, at a party, okay? So, I mean, look, you could have ice cream. I love ice cream. Does that mean you have it every day? Does that mean, no, you have it once a month or twice a month or whatever, So anyway, are there any things that you could help people kind of, get away from this, like giving up and saying, oh, God made me this way, so it's all over. That's it. Because I want to talk a little bit also about the new weight loss drugs and the bariatric surgery and that sort of thing. But if you can kind of shed some light on that, the kind of the spiritual manipulation that's used to
Right.
justify
Well,
it
I mean,
as an excuse.
the thing that happened, I think we have to go back to a place of really learning and understanding God, and to have the Holy Spirit speak to us about who He is and who we are in relation to Him. And I think that is key, because when you go into that direction, you realize that you're fearfully and wonderfully made.
Mm,
And so therefore we have, this desire to be healthy, and everything. I mean, I personally, I enjoy sweets still and everything, but I don't eat a whole brownie pie anymore.
right.
I have practices. I was telling my dentist, I was just like, that she was talking to me, clean my teeth, and she was like, oh, how often do you go for a walk? And I said, I go for a walk like most of the week. I'm going on Monday, I'm going on Wednesday, and I go Friday and Saturday, and I told her I used to go on Sundays as well. But that's a discipline that I have, picked up as a result of desiring to be healthy and to maintain my health. And I don't make an excuse that, oh, it's cold, oh, it's raining, oh, there's snow, oh, it's dark, or anything like that. I see, because for me, I like to grill. And I would always just, like, if it was raining, pull the grill up to the door, get an umbrella, and figure out how to, still cook. And so I said, it's the same discipline. If I'm willing to do that, then rain, hail, sleet, or dark of night should not keep me from going for a walk and taking care of my
Mm,
health. And not only is it physically beneficial, it is spiritually beneficial, emotionally
mm,
beneficial, because one of the things we have to do is to be able to talk about the emotions that we're having. Somebody said something to us or something happened, and we dumb it down with food and suppress and all of those things. And what we need to do is to be able to express it. That's one of the things that I did, and started doing consistently, because before I would not talk about what was bothering me.
mm,
I wouldn't say, this, I was really upset about this thing. I would suppress it. And so instead of suppressing, and that's part of the self-love, is to be able to express it. And
mm.
whether you're expressing it to somebody else, or expressing it through journaling, or expressing it out loud to God, and, walking in the woods and screaming if you need to, is to get it out, so that this is no longer something that's holding you hostage, where you're feeding it and it's not working.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's such a vicious cycle because the body, like you said, getting it out when when you have a lot of body fat, and you said it's a vicious cycle because it's hard to love yourself. You could say you love yourself, but you really don't. And one of the reasons why I'm saying that is because the body you're set up not to love yourself. And I'm going to go into the biochemistry of that, because fat has a lot of inflammatory uh, uh, products, if you will. They're called cytokines, okay? And cytokines are the things in our body that signal that there's danger and that we need to recruit certain things like the immune system to take care of it. And the fat secretes cytokines. And a lot of people may have heard that term used with COVID when COVID first came around, and when it came to the United States, and people would go in what's called a cytokine storm. It was an over exaggeration of the inflammatory response. And that's why people got so deadly sick, is because the inflammation was over, was the virus itself created this cytokine storm. And so our fat cells have those cytokines. So those fat cells are always signaling to the body that we're in danger. And it's like it's an inflammatory response that is not a good inflammatory response. So that inflammatory response, not only does it physiologically put the body, but the body sends signals to the brain. And if the signals to the brain are saying we're in danger, well, that puts us in a constant fight or flight mode. And to love yourself is not a fearful response, okay? Because loving yourself is accepting, is giving yourself grace. So if we're in that constant fight or flight from the way our fat cells are producing these things, it's a vicious cycle, right? And so it's really hard. And that's why it's not, you know, I really, people have to get now this idea of fat shaming. Don't even listen to anybody else. Listen to yourself and your body, and know, like you're saying, Sopheia, you're doing things when you take responsibility and do things for yourself that are healthy. It makes you feel so good, right? So tell me, like, the Sopheia who is 100 pounds more compared to the Sopheia who is now, and the things you're doing now, and what that does to you emotionally, because that, like I said at the beginning, people come to the doctor's office because emotional issues or lifestyle choices, and the two go hand in hand.
Yes. Well, I mean, like I mentioned, the picture taking, I would be so upset about people taking my picture, and I would not feel good about me. I would not look in the mirror. I wouldn't, look at myself in the mirror, because I would be so embarrassed and so hurt that this was my state. And I felt like I was always in that fight, trying to change, working hard on changing, learning about natural health medicine, getting certified, learning about diet and exercise and all of those things, and putting them together and doing lots of exercise and just doing a lot. I was a lot of doing, and I wasn't being. And so I think at the point where my soul prosperity came in, was about the being. Who was I being? And how was I being the person that I wanted to be? And so those are things that happen, and I had to move past them and get to that place of being. And so for me now, it's like the person I am now is like, I look in the mirror and I, look at myself and I accept myself for who I am. I was just like, I'm perfect for me, not for all of everybody else and for their status and standards. I said, when we even look at people who are overweight, sometimes when those people have lost 100 pounds or even 200 pounds, and they still weigh 400 pounds, we're like, oh my gosh, they haven't done anything, because we haven't seen the journey. We're not aware of it. And so I extend grace not only to myself, but to other people as well, because I used to be a person who would think like, oh my goodness, somebody says something about weight loss, and I would look and I'd be like, and I would make a judgment. And I had that same judgment turn in on me, in that when I first started to do social media, and they told me I had to be on Facebook and do Facebook Lives, I cried. I was like, no, I do not want to do that, because my thinking at the time was that people are going to see me, and because I'm larger busted up here, they're going to look at me and they're going to say, she didn't lose any 100 pounds, she lost. And so then I'll have to go into that whole embarrassment and all kind of self-talk and different things like that. But once I was able to embrace myself and realize that I am doing the best I can for me, I'm taking responsibility for my life. I know where I've been and I know where I've come to, and where I am today. And to just take every necessary step. The walking on a regular basis is something that I incorporated, because before I would be doing really hard exercise. I would break machines. I would seize the latest thing on TV. I would buy it and take it to my house, and then I would work hard on it. And if they said to do 15 minutes, I was like, 30 minutes is what I'm going to do. And the machine would break and I would have to return it and say, well, it broke and it was only a week.
Yeah.
So different things like that. But to become consistent in a way that I'm taking responsibility, I'm lovingly caring for myself, to help myself not only physically, but spiritually, emotionally, and in every way possible.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Yeah. I mean, it's important to make a change. You have to make a change. And sometimes it has to be drastic, because I talked about the cells of our body, in kind of my paradigm of thinking. It's the body, when our brain detects danger, threat, or vulnerability, it only reacts in two ways: fight or flight. But the cells of our body are are controlled by the brain, are in the same state. So when we have gotten used to, gotten familiar with a particular body type, it goes to the cells of our body. So the cells of our body are used to the environment of those inflammatory markers, the cytokines, all the environment, the milieu, if you will, of what's surrounding them. And if you change, it's going to resist that change.
Yes.
That's why it takes that self-discipline and self-honesty. And that's why, again, we say, give yourself grace and understand that it will be a journey, but don't deceive yourself. Like you said, with the excuses. But I would even say, don't deceive yourself with the voices of the culture, which are telling you that this is normal for you. You're normal to be 200 pounds overweight, to have a body mass index of 50 or 40, whatever. It's okay. That's how you were born. As you know, what you're eating can't be healthy for you. You know it. The amount you're eating, or the type of food you're eating. And I know, I'm sure that was also something that you probably hit you, right? I
Right.
mean, was it the type of foods you would say hit you first, or the amount? What would you, because you said the sweets, right?
It was the type. It was the type.
Yeah.
And so, and it was a lot of the type of foods.
Right.
So when I talk about this whole brownie pie, anybody who would hear whole brownie pies, that is not the best, choice.
Yeah.
Or whole big bowls of cereal, not like your little big bowls or your regular bowls of cereal that you're supposed to eat. I would have like a big bowl, and I would crunch my way into feeling better. And so once I became aware of it, because it wasn't always conscious. And that's the thing. I sometimes we know at the top of our heads what's the right thing to do, how to behave, how to eat, how to do all of those things. But it's the top of the head thinking, and it's only 5%, and it's not backed up by the inner workings of that belief system or the subconscious mind. And so that's the whole part of the transformation that has to occur, is to get that 95%, is to do enough of the right things on a regular, consistent basis to then have your body relearn a new program and to have your beliefs be in support of the new thing that you're doing. And you have to do it long enough until, it becomes, ingrained, so to
Yes.
speak. So it is supporting, so for me now, it's like, if I don't go for a walk, I'm like, no, I want to go for my walk. You know what I'm saying? It's just, even if it's cold, I'm like, I desire to go for my walk, because now that particular activity is supported by my belief system. So it's a lot of changing your belief system and perspective.
Yeah, that's great, because it does that helps the internal, because as your body's resisting externally and internally that change, it does take the consistency. And self-honesty is doesn't mean that you have to be mean to yourself, or you have to be have no grace or love for yourself, but it does mean that the biggest, it's the same as a parent or someone who you love who's doing something. It's better to be straight and honest than it is to kind of beat around the bush and not be direct, or and so it's the same thing with change. And one of the biggest things that speaks to me, that kind of is evident, that the majority of people who are morbidly obese are eating too much, or too much of the wrong things. Okay. But even too much. So for instance, if I could do a vigorous workout, and I work out, and I can look at my, my smartwatch, and I've burned 550 calories. You know how easy it is to eat 550 calories? So there are
Yes.
many people who work out fanatically, but are morbidly obese,
Mhm.
or obese. They're not a healthy body weight. That's because they're rewarding themselves, in quotes, for their exercise, and they're eating and making way overshooting what they've burned off, in a way. So,
Right.
but what I was going to say is, you look at the bariatric surgery. So bariatric surgery, the only function of bariatric surgery is to make a person eat less. Right. Same with Mounjaro or Ozempic or Wegovy, all these new what are called GLP-1 agonists, glucagon-like protein agonists. Okay. They make you feel full. So you're sated, you have early
Mhm.
satiety, you're not as hungry, and you lose weight. Doesn't magically do something that makes you, no, it's the caloric intake, which is much less. And so when I say being honest with yourself, that's what I mean. Is not to
Mhm.
say, oh, he eats so much more than I ever eat, or she eats so much more than I ever eat, and whatever. No, you have to look, first of all, who are you comparing yourself with? You don't
Right.
know what their journey is,
Right.
and you have to know what works for you. And
Right.
I think that's what you're doing and talking
Yes.
about.
I mean, it's really important to recognize that for yourself, not to compare yourself to other people, because everybody's on their own personal journey. Everybody is unique to themselves. And what may have worked, and that's the other thing about like diet or exercise or even the surgeries, what may work for some people will not work for all people.
Hmm.
And there have been people who has had, at one point when I was at my heaviest weight, I did sign up for bariatric surgery, and they took a really long time. Well, when I went for the physical and they did the physical, they said everything else, is fine. Blood pressure, no diabetes, nothing like that. Why are you here? And I was just like, with my weight, and so they took a very long time even before they could approve me. And I was thinking to myself, I sat down, I was like, if I had done one of my programs, at least I would have lost 50 pounds.
Right.
So therefore, I don't need to stand around for this. So I called the lady. I said, look, it's just taking so long, and I'm going to try something one last time. And so that was when I discovered that Soul's Prosperity, and it changed my journey. And so I canceled the surgery. But the thing about that surgery, even though we have less food that we eat, you can stretch your stomach out again. And some people who haven't learned the discipline, the behavior, learn to change those belief system, they will get the surgery. They're not working on themselves. They're not, discovering the old patterns that caused them to eat, or whatever childhood trauma or drama occurred that caused them to be now in this position. And when you don't do that, you leave a lot on the table, and then you eat and eat and eat, and you just find yourself going all the way back to where you have been, because you're not willing to really do the inner work to cause the transformation and change, so that you are no longer that person that you used to be.
Yeah. Speaking my language, Sophia, because in my practice, I saw that, right? You may read the studies and they'll say, 20 to 30% of people gain it. No, I will say it's at least 60 to 80% of people will gain the weight back or more, whether it's bariatric surgery or whether it's the GLP-1 agonist now. Now, that's just my anecdotal observation, right? I don't have detailed studies that show it, but like you said, unless they're doing the inner work, their body, you're eating in excess of what you need to survive, only because you're working on that automatic brain, that primitive nature, which is fight or flight. So if you don't tend to, like you said, I love, instead of childhood trauma, childhood drama. So you don't have to have, absolute trauma, but drama is the familiar pattern growing up, and we fight and flee the unfamiliar. So we're going to gravitate toward the familiar, and that familiar may be us being obese. So unless you work, though, do that inner work, that self-mastery, like you're talking about, it just, you got to do the work. It takes time, and don't delude yourself and say, oh, this is just the way I am. And, or be honest with yourself, and
Right.
say, okay, I know I'm obese. It's unhealthy. As a
Right.
doctor, I'm not judging you because I don't like the way you look or because of it. No, I'm judging you because I know that obesity is the risk factor for every single medical disease, from
Right.
inflammatory diseases to diabetes, to heart disease, to cancer, you name it. It's a risk factor. So as a caring person and as a physician, I would like to see you change that.
Right.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
and that's why, Sophia, you're not a medical doctor, but you're a very educated and insightful person and coach. And that's why I like to have people like you on my program.
Oh, thank you so much. I
Yeah.
mean, I totally agree with you in terms of that self-honesty. One of the key factors is healing, is going through that process of healing, and
Yeah.
then looking at how you can approach that healing. Because if, let's say, your father abandoned you, or your mother abandoned you, or whatever the situation, you were violated and all of those things, is being able to go through that process of healing and forgiveness,
Mm.
extending grace and love to yourself, accepting that is the reality that happened, and making a new commitment to yourself. This is how I'm going to live my life from
Yeah.
here on out, not staying in the same way. Because I think we can get to acceptance and self-honesty and all of those things, but we have to get to that place of forgiveness,
Mm.
forgiving yourself for holding on to this thing for so long, that and having it affect your life in this dramatic way, and then forgiving the perpetrator if you feel that there is a perpetrator that has contributed to this, and then stepping into that place of making a new commitment on how you plan to walk out your healing and your state of being for the rest of your life.
I love that. So, Sophia, thank you so much for sharing your words with us coming on the program. I'm going to send links. I'll have links in the description on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify, and how to get in touch with Sophia. It's Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on again. And I'm going to bid adieu to my audience. And as always, as you know, I'm Dr. Charles, aka Coach MD, urging you to stay strong in mind, in body, and as Sopheia says, and all of us know, right here in the soul. Bye for now.